Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay. I had a meeting in this room the other day and I monkeyed with all the technology, so took us a couple minutes to get sorted out. Good evening and welcome to the Council Workshop for Monday, April 25th at 5 o'clock. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Murray. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I should have said at the top of the meeting, Councillor Curran is not going to be able to join us for the workshop, but is going to do her best to join us for the regular meeting of Council at 7. With that in mind, we normally have workshops on a Tuesday with a pretty open end. We do have a regular meeting of Council scheduled for after this workshop. I'd really like to be able to move over to the other meeting by about 6:45. So with that time in mind, I'll move on now to the reports from Councillor staff, which is the main item for this evening's discussion. It's item 3.1, Marine Drive Commercial Zone C9 Review. At this point, I'm going to go, I see Mr. Stewart, you're queued. Do you have any comments to open us off on this?
No, Your Worship, I'll turn this over to staff. I think we're clear on the purpose of the workshop, which is to really have a good second look at what we wanted to do on Marine Drive and what we've achieved. So,
Mr. Milburn, comments?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. This report provides an overview of the progress that's been occurred in the Marine Drive Commercial Corridor since 2007, when the Marine Drive Commercial Zone C9 was established. The area has been in transition since that time, and staff have presented materials in tonight's agenda for Council consideration, and Mr. Joshua Carnes has a presentation to provide Council in advance of a conversation, and we very much look forward to the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. So I'll share my screen here in the presentation. Great. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. So to start us off, as Mr. Milburn mentioned, I'll just do a brief presentation that summarizes the work completed to date on this topic, as well as the focus of tonight's workshop on the Marine Drive Commercial Zone C9 review. So first, a little bit of background on how we got here. Well, in 1999, the Marine Drive Improvement Study was initiated at the request of 4 community associations. The study explored ways the Marine Drive corridor could be transformed from its state at the time, which was an arterial street with vehicle-oriented businesses and really little pedestrian activity in a poor public realm. This study involved extensive community engagement, including the 4 subcommittees consisting of community associations, merchants, property owners, as well as council advisory committees. In 2005, the outcome of the work, the Marine Drive Improvement Strategy, was presented to Council. This strategy outlined a new vision for Marine Drive, one that could become, over time, a distinctive, vibrant, and commercial street that was walkable and really offered a mix of businesses. Implementation items were adopted 2 years later in 2007, and that included rezoning most of the properties along the corridor from, at the time, C2 and C3 zoning to a brand new C9 zone, and that was developed specifically to realize the vision of the improvement strategy. Design guidelines were also adopted, which informed the design of new developments along the corridor. Recently, some members of Council have expressed an interest in taking a look at how implementation has proceeded and potentially identifying some perceived problems that could be explored further. This page shows a map of the Marine Drive corridor and how these implementation items overlap. You'll notice most of the corridor is now zoned C9 within the black bounded box on the screen, while the majority of the corridor east of Lionsgate Village is also subject to the Marine Drive design guidelines. While there are some C9 zone properties in the village center to the west, the focus tonight is on the Marine Drive corridor under the Marine Drive design guidelines, which is shown in blue. This area generally stretches from McGuire Avenue in the west to McKay Road in the east. Some of the comments made by Council relates to the evolution of the corridor since 2007, potential noise concerns, as well as the mix of businesses that have occupancy in the area. We provided an information report with some background information on the evolution of the corridor in February, and today's report to council provides additional information on the other topics to support discussion tonight. I'll flip through these next few slides quickly. They're really intended to show how the corridor has evolved over time, including its gradual transition to becoming a more inviting, pedestrian-friendly street with a really vibrant mix of businesses. So here you can see, looking from the southwest corner of Pemberton Avenue, a transition from an older 2-story building to a new 4-story mixed-use building with a little bit of a pocket plaza at grade and new commercial units. As you continue down the corridor, this view looks northwest from Marine Drive and Lloyd Avenue, and we can see the transition from what was a parking lot and Bank of Montreal building to a new mixed-use building, again, 4 stories with a prominent commercial frontage and new smaller CRUs a bit further west. This view looks southwest. The photo previously was taken in 2011. We can see quite a transformation there from mostly surface parking to a new 4-story building, providing several retail units at grade with residential above. And then continuing down the corridor, we see similar evolution from the sort of 1 to 2-story commercial or parking lot to new 4-story mixed-use developments. And so while some of the key changes on a number of sites have resulted in new opportunities, housing units, and a really improved public realm, the corridor does in large part remain in transition. We estimate approximately 35% of the property frontage along Marine Drive has either been developed or is in progress, which leaves approximately 2/3 of the corridor still to come. As mentioned, today's report to council for this workshop provides information on the remaining topic areas related to noise complaints and the mix of businesses in the corridor. More information on these 2 topics is provided in the council report, while results of staff's analysis on the evolution that was presented in February is provided in attachment 2. This is a really excellent opportunity for the committee to have a conversation around some of the perceived issues it feels we may be experiencing in the corridor that could require deeper analysis. Beginning with noise, our records indicate there have been a total of 48 noise complaints reported to the district in the Marine Drive corridor since 2007. These complaints were predominantly related to construction and mechanical noises, the result of having residents in close proximity to frequent transit and in an area that's undergoing transition. Only 1 record on file was related to noise stemming from a business's operations. When we compare the Marine Drive corridor to other commercial centers in the district, we can see the number of noise complaints is generally consistent and in line with what we'd expect for this type of an area. One of the objectives of the C9 zone was to provide for the daily needs of residents through diverse businesses. As you can see on the slide, we've seen evidence of that diversity begin to be achieved here, as we've experienced 151,000 square feet of new commercial floor area being added along the corridor since 2007, and that's really added to a broad mix of businesses. This slide here shows a present day snapshot of the mix of businesses in the corridor, with retail, office, and restaurant uses taking up more than half of all commercial floor area. A full breakdown of the distribution of these businesses is provided in Table 2 in the council report. What you see here is what a typical review process could look like for any given topic. Should council ask staff to undertake further work that could result in possible changes to Marine Drive, the first step in that process would be for the committee to pass a recommendation for council that defines any of these perceived problems for further investigation. Depending on the outcomes of the workshop, next steps could include further analysis that could seek to identify causes of the problem, followed by the preparation and evaluation of potential options for council to consider. So with that in mind, I'll conclude the presentation here, asking kind of one of the key questions, which is, of the topics that have been recapped by staff in tonight's report and the February 8th report, which of them is the highest priority issue for staff to investigate? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, any other comments from staff or head to council? Okay, council members, what's your pleasure? Councillor Back.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much, Mr. Cairns, for the presentation tonight. So I'll just take the initial comment on this. I think it is clear that this corridor is an area that's in transition. It doesn't feel like that distinctive, vibrant, walkable space that was envisioned in the strategy. You know, and maybe one of the areas that I focus on is the business mix. I note in the report that over 30% of the business licenses in the area are for office purposes. Offices don't create vibrancy, you know, when they're on your main arterial road, like Marine Drive. So I'm interested in taking a look at that in terms of how we kind of get more of those smaller businesses, and just a different mix of businesses that are going to appeal more to people on a day-to-day basis. Maybe some more, you know, little restaurants, some cafes, but other types of services as well. I feel like that's part of what's missing throughout that whole corridor, is just that feeling of vibrancy, of activity, and just being welcoming. You know, the businesses being a welcoming part of the street front there. I know there's a couple of examples that come to mind. I think it's the White Spot building that kind of feels like a little bit of a dead zone as you're going by there, at least if you're walking by. In terms of the street design itself, I'd be interested in staff's comment on that, to see how we make it, you know, a little bit more of an active transportation friendly corridor. It still feels like it's very much, you know, vehicle heavy, vehicle centric kind of corridor. And I'm wondering if we've given any thought to some potential changes to the actual street design through there. But those are just some of my initial comments.
Okay. Mr. Stewart, I see a response from you.
Your worship, it's not so much a response as maybe a question for staff. Showing the current mix doesn't really tell the picture of what's happened since we made the change. And so it would be helpful to understand, because those are in all cases likely attributable to a market trend. And so perhaps staff could talk about how what's new that's come in is different than the older mix. That might be helpful in terms of the discussion.
Okay. Mr. Milburn, do you have a response to that, or I think that was directed back to staff?
Maybe Josh, if you can pull up the slide that shows the mix of businesses. I believe it's a breakdown of the mix of the tenancies. Maybe Josh can confirm all tenancies or the tenancies that have been built since 2007.
I'll pull up that slide here and pop it back up on the screen for everyone to see. And yes, I can confirm. So the data that you see up here showing the distribution of businesses, that is a current snapshot of what is there today. Basically,
I don't think the slides, I can't see the slide on the Zoom screen.
Correct, I can't either. We're gonna
there we
have
go. Thanks, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a current snapshot when we pulled these. There have been, I believe, a total of 2 vehicle dealerships that have redeveloped from what was previously mostly underutilized or just open asphalt parking lots to sort of the newer, a little bit more mixed use, or at least pulling the building to the street level with a more activated pedestrian realm. It is possible to sort of look back at a snapshot in 2007 of what was there and how that proportion has shifted over time, although there's significant challenges with doing so, and that's mostly due to an evolution of our systems for how we track business license data, as well as changes in addresses from the older system to our new, more modern system for tracking this. So that data, in terms of the change in mix over time, can be done. We have some sort of anecdotal data today that we could reference, but staff could go away and look at that and provide more detailed information later.
Your worship, perhaps even just anecdotally, I mean, when we look at what's gone in, what has gone in, again, as compared to the balance of the area? Because I think that's the focus of the discussion, because what I've heard expressed by council is a concern that we're getting a certain type of redevelopment that doesn't necessarily satisfy the needs of the community nor the goals of the Marine Drive corridor. So maybe even, yeah, I realize it's tough just to do a very comprehensive look at that without going back to the data, but I would be just interested anecdotally, what kind of redevelopment are we getting since 2007? And is that the mix that we want? Because it's likely, if that's the market trend, unless we intervene, that's what we're going to get as the balance of the Marine Drive redevelops.
Your Worship, and maybe I can just jump in while Josh thinks about the anecdotes that he's discovered through his research. When we look at the images, the before and after images, it's quite clear that we've created new space from parking lots. So it's essentially turning vacant floor area into new floor area in many cases. And then we had, as shown, examples of where there was maybe one tenancy. There were some examples of the smaller tenancies as well, those 2 stories, smaller tenancies getting converted, but the total square footage increased in all those various cases of commercial space. So I'm not sure, Josh or Tina, if you had any additional information to provide. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. I will say some of the spots that I've enjoyed over the last few years. One of the slides showed this, the change of the building on Pemberton from an industrial building to a mixed-use building with a coffee shop there. I was able to stop there with my son on the way to his job in Park Royal. Biking or cycling was another question, I think, through Your Worship to Councillor Beck. I was riding my bike there the other day, and it was actually okay, better than I thought it would be. There are there's a wide shoulder in some areas. There's some secure. I felt more secure in some of our rapid bus lanes, but yeah, I certainly can't speak from an engineering perspective on further, road allocation changes that may be planned for this area, but certainly we've got the Spirit Trail and other off-street routes. We certainly also like to have a variety of options for cyclists, those who want to go straight alone and stop on their bikes and stop and use the businesses here, as well as being off-street for other more recreational purposes.
Thank you very much. Just some of my own comments on the matter. I think that we have been able to make positive changes within the Marine Drive corridor. There have been some challenges with it. I mean, I remember when we had the discussion originally, one of the big focuses was to change the signage through the corridor as well as the parking. And there was, we used to have a lot of those old standalone neon signs and standalone adverts out of the street, and they made it quite cluttered as you went down the road. And so the idea was to integrate a lot more of the signs into the buildings, have a clearer walking space through there. I think that largely has been achieved through the corridor. The things that sort of still stick out to me, though, I mean, we have just west of the McDonald's, we have something odd happening there. There's what used to be a conventional retail car parking lot, which is now a gallery, we'll say. In fact, there's a big sign in the window that says cars are not for sale. And somebody's using it as storage for a whole bunch of 1980s Mercedes. Lovely cars. I've walked around, had a look at the cars, but it is certainly not the use that was intended for that area, although it, since we, in the Marine Drive plan, in the C9, got rid of car shops or largely made them legally non-conforming, we somehow ended up with this bizarre use where somebody's bought commercial space and is using it just to show off cars, not actually sell them. And I don't know that it meets the requirements of it, but it was a little bit bizarre to see. I think there's another facility that's doing a similar thing just by the Cactus Club on Pemberton as well. So there's something in the math doesn't work out, and you end up having these non-retail spaces in what was intended to be retail areas. So I'd kind of like us to look into that. I certainly don't want to see that replicated or expanded to other areas, even though they're pretty cool cars. But the other thing that I've noted about it is, TransLink has released just this last week the draft vision for the next 10 years, which the Mayor's Committee and Council has been working on for a long time now. And in it, it contemplates rapid transit from Metro Vancouver through to Park Royal. And while it may not be perfectly throughout the corridor along the R2, or the former 239 bus route, I think we can largely assume that there's going to be a major rapid transit connection through this space in the next 10 years. and that we need to plan for it. Not only implementation of BRT, but potential upgrades to light rail or SkyTrain through this space. And so when we look at C9, I think we will have to look at it through the lens of attracting the higher transportation service to this corridor. Now, I'm cautious of over-densifying an area that has actually rather limited capacity in terms of through streets and alternatives. But once you get transit in there, you have the opportunity to revision what you can do with the space. And so I would assume, I mean, the R2 has a stop at about Pemberton, I think it's just east of Pemberton, and it has another stop over at near our new rec center at the foot of Cap Road. And so I have to assume that those two spots will be stops for higher level rapid transit over the next 10 to 20 years. And we should be contemplating what that will look like as far as transit-oriented development and supporting those stations and making sure that our community has both good options for housing, but alternatives to get out of their car. So I just thought those two observations might help us as we look at C9 going forward, but I'd say there's been a lot of positives in that area. I would like to see more variety in the types of buildings that come forward, but I completely understand why you get this uniformity with the way our guidelines work. But yeah, no, I think it's a positive. The next speaker, and actually I'm going to have to step away from the chair for a little bit here, and Councillor Murray is our acting mayor, and she's the next speaker, so I'm going to hand the chair over to Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Mayor Little. Thanks for the presentation. You know, I wouldn't describe my concerns. I've had concerns for a number of years. This is not something new that I've been requesting. I don't see them as problems. I just see them as lost opportunities. You know, when we blanket zoned Marine Drive with the intent of moving the car dealerships off Marine Drive, it was because the Auto Mall had just been built. I guess we thought in our wisdom of the day at the time that, you know, if we rezoned it, they'd just all move down to the Auto Mall. And I guess some of them were smart enough to go, no, we're going to open a dealership down there and we're going to keep the land up here as well and see what happens. And, you know, they certainly have done well for themselves by staying put. But you know, I think what's evolved, and you know, there's been certainly some, you know, change. I mean, the pictures that you put up on the screen, Mr. Carnes, were, you know, large parking lots accommodating. I remember Dave Buck Ford on Marine Drive. You know, it was an office and a bunch of cars. It was a big parking lot. So you're right. Certainly, we've evolved from there. But I think we made some, you know, errors too. In those days, we weren't thinking of amenity contributions. There was no, you know, environmental assessment of the buildings that we were rezoning, and we lost some opportunities with developers. We also did not put in minimum or maximum size units. And minimum and maximum size, and I've checked with the planning department in the city of North Vancouver several years ago, they did put minimum and maximum size units in Lower Lonsdale. And that's why we're getting the variety of retail storefronts in Lower Lonsdale, because they kept them to a certain size. And they did not allow the whole block to consolidate all the retail units into one. You know, 25 years ago, when developers would develop, they would come in and they would option the property. They would option the property for the resale of the residential units. And then once all the units were sold, then they would sell the commercial. But developers don't do that anymore. They retain the commercial as part of a new business model. And they control those lease rates as they move forward. So those properties, those you know, individual retail commercial properties are not sold, they're kept, they're leased. And there is an ability on Marine Drive to, you know, take up a half a block of units and turn it into a bank or a chiropractor, dentist, or doctor. And that's where we're not getting the variety, because the uses that are contained in that retail zone or in that C9 zone are allowing these uses to be taken up on the retail floor. You know, I've been making suggestions for a number of years that haven't really gotten anywhere, and I'm really glad that we're talking about it finally. Two things: that business office, you know, should be maintained on a second floor. And it's this example is you can see it on the Broadway corridor, close to Jericho. In some of the new redeveloped blocks, they are putting an office on the second floor. They're putting retail, actual retail, the baker, the butcher, and the candlestick maker, and then they're putting residential or office above. You know, I think it has been a lost opportunity when we see, as you know, some councillors have pointed out, you know, windows that are just all covered with, window coverings to prevent you looking into an office all along a retail sector, and that's why there's no variety, there's no busyness. A lot of the businesses as well are destination businesses. You know, Orange Theory, for instance, you know, that's not just for the neighborhood. That's a regional draw. There's only one Orange Theory on the North Shore. It's a great workout. You know, it's a very popular workout, and people come from all over the place, you know, to use it. The same with the dentists, the banks, the chiropractors, the doctor's offices, all regional draws. And I don't think that's really what the intent was. But when we did it, we weren't thinking that it wasn't going to just evolve into, you know, the fruit stand, the butcher, the dry cleaners, and I think the other thing on the design guidelines, and again, I've been chirping like a bird for years about this one as well. You know, the tilted front roof ceilings or roof line. You know, we wanted to protect the shadowing to the single family behind, and certainly on the northern part of Marine Drive that still exists, but on the south, it's, you know, it's more of a 4-story condo complex. And I just think in 20 years, I mean, already I'm looking back and going, you know, there's got to be something more architectural than these tilted roofs. They are repetitive all the way down the road. They all look the same. You know, they're book plans, in my opinion, and they really aren't, you know, doing anything to create any sort of visual interest as you drive through the area. The most architectural piece of development that I see is the old Avalon Taylor's Crossing that is predominantly brick. It's clad very differently. It's got sort of a walk-through mezzanine to the rear parking lot. There's some interest, there's some curves. The roof line's different. You know, it's really that part of the block is really the most interesting. I think the presentation too, in the sort of the breakup of the retail and the business, et cetera, there's still that existing block of Save on Foods, for instance. You know, that there is more variety in that Save on Foods development than I think there is on the rest of the street. You know, or there once was. So I'd really like us to look at the minimums and the maximum size units, maybe looking at the remaining properties, and maybe, you know, going out for some consultation on what we could do to accommodate office on a second floor, retail on a main floor, and really tighten the uses there. So retail was something that we focused on. And I think we have to be really careful that we don't allow the same uses repetitively in the same block. I mean, you don't want nail salons in every block. You don't want banks in every block. You know, you don't want chiropractors in every block. And I'm not against any of those services, but we have to mix it up. And I think we would, I think we would benefit from taking a look at how the city of North Vancouver, specifically in Lower Lonsdale, has looked at their uses in those 4 or 5 blocks of Lower Lonsdale, because I think there is a great variety of services that are provided there. Okay, so that's my 2 bits for the moment. We'll go to Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't have the same institutional history as some others at this table with respect to the evolution of the planning process. I mean, I do agree broadly. It seems to be a step in the right direction compared to the way it was and what we're seeing now. I would say, though, that if I'm going to focus a little bit on what I'd call the pedestrian livability or the cycling livability of the vicinity. If our goal was to, as is stated in the report, create diverse transportation options and in an environment that is other than a busy street, I'm not sure that we've succeeded in that, and it might be challenging. I'm not exactly sure how we would go about that, but it is still really a very busy street with businesses along the side of it. And as I say, that might be a challenge to overcome. I wondered when I considered the matter if we could make it greener in some way. Is there some way that we could have more trees, plants, and shrubs along this area? If we could, I think our descendants would thank us. That could make it more pedestrian livable. And I also wonder what the strategies would be to make it better for cyclers and walkers and less of a car-dominated stretch of road. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Bond.
Thanks. I have okay, messed up. Only second time back in the hall in a while. So similar comments to the rest of my colleagues. I think it's going to be a challenge, especially on this corridor, with the volume of drivers and cars and trucks and transit vehicles to really fulfill and have that vibrant and welcoming pedestrian space. I'm wondering if staff have any example corridors, if there's other corridors that staff are looking to as reference, something that is a 4 or sometimes 5 with turning lanes corridor in the region that has the mix of businesses and retail that we are trying to use perhaps as an example or a reference, and how we might compare to that. Especially, I know, being down on Marine Drive, especially during rush hour or when it's raining, it's very loud. I think I was there and I was waiting for the bus and I took out my decibel meter on my phone, and it was the sound of same level, about 70, 80 decibels, which is basically the sound of a blender in your home blender. So I think there's going to be some challenges, and so if staff can kind of point us to some examples of what we're trying to achieve that people might be familiar with, that would be helpful. The other comment I have is I think Mayor Little's comment about perhaps a longer term look at this, and how because the zoning and the change from to C9 was done quite a long time ago, and we might need to look, I think, maybe a little bit farther out. I'm not sure if that's something that we would do as part of maybe the next OCP update, but if we are looking at some form of rapid transit, whether that's a bus rapid transit or something different along this corridor in the next 10, 20 years, it would be useful and helpful to start planning that now. And I can see, second or third floor office space to encourage the employment uses in those areas instead of on the ground floor. Same with some of the, I know, there's a number of, at least 2 childcare facilities that are, again, what was once a retail commercial space. Is that the best use in those areas? We need childcare. We need a lot of childcare space, but and operators are making use of what's available. but it would be helpful to kind of look at that as well. It would probably mean more height, but we do have time, I think, before any major changes to the transportation infrastructure happen. So just echoing the other comments, Councillor Murray's comments about unit sizes, I think we've talked about that a number of times, and trying to make those retail spaces, those smaller floor plates and smaller businesses more viable along the corridor. I think one other thought that I have is that, you know, there's is it approximately a third of the properties along the corridor have been redeveloped over the past 20 years, and I think when I think of vibrant areas, either in the Lower Mainland, vibrant commercial corridors, if you think of Commercial Drive or West 4th or other areas, even Fraser Street in Vancouver, that have a great variety of retail uses, they've been there for a long time. And so I think over time, as the corridor gets built out, the uses will change, and we'll probably see more variety as a cause of time than we would from necessity or necessarily any bylaw changes that we make in the corridor. So those are some thoughts.
Thank you. I think the issue that you brought up in regards to the child care sort of taking over the retail part, the current bylaw allows childcare to go into every zone. And of course, we need to continue to support child care across the district. But I think that we should look at, what, the allowance that it can go in every zone. I know that there's one that's opened up in a light industrial space down off Mountain Highway, a light industrial space that has full height ceilings for lifts and, industrial uses, where they had a second floor within the building, and they could have taken up the second floor and maintained the full height for sort of an industrial or commercial, operation. And I really think that we need to ask staff to come back for a review on that, especially in new redeveloped areas. I think the white spot is an example of, maybe the negative is a whole restaurant taking up, half a block. But the positive on that building is that the childcare is on the second floor. So, they access the parking lot, but the childcare is on the second floor, and it's allowing a retail use to exist on the main. And I think that's, in order to keep retail vibrant and that busyness and that sustainable model in an area, you have to be able to allow a whole bunch of different kinds of shops to go in on that area, because really what's happened on Marine Drive is it's become unsustainable, because you've got one grocery store option. You'd have to drive down to the city to go to the IGA or Save on Foods down in the city. I don't know, by putting commercial and destination or regional draws on main floors is a good planning model. You've pointed out, Councillor Bond, in West 4th and Broadway, along the Broadway corridor towards Arbutus. The street is filled with people. There are lots of, different retail options, a mix of restaurants, services, all sorts of shopping. And the daycare and the offices still exist, but they're on the second floor, or they're set back. So I really think that we want to look at this quite quickly, because I think we're going to lose some opportunities. And as other properties redevelop, we'll want to be able to, maybe, reduce the footprint of their unit size. I think the Blue Shore was an example of smaller units. They had 5 doors on a rendering. Whether that is going to be a reality when it's actually built, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it did look that there were smaller units. I'll go to Ms. Atfa and then Mr. Milburn, and I'm going to let the dog out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. In terms of other examples, one that comes to mind is Hastings Street in Burnaby, from Boundary to about Willingdon. Similar wide street, formerly a provincial highway, also a rapid bus. It was maybe in the 90s that I recall, when Burnaby pre-zoned most of that area as well. So also was not able to take amenities. smaller units. There's a business, I believe there's a business improvement area there. They close off the street every year. Many of you will be familiar with this for the annual Hats Off Day. So there's a real sense of pride and fun to be able to walk and ride down this very busy street one time a year. Similar from what I recall, and we will look at these areas and others as well. Kingsway, Broadway come to mind, St. John's and Port Moody. But what I do remember from the zones in Burnaby are there were some similar setbacks, main floor setbacks, to try and get some more patio life, restaurant life, surrounded really by a single family neighborhood with some multifamily on either street, north or south. So also some similarities, I would say, in terms of that mix.
Mr. Melbourne.
Thank you. I just wanted to play off a couple of the comments we've had with respect to commercial space, and it strikes me that some commercial space sort of economic analysis would benefit this conversation as well, because as has been mentioned, often older retail strips have that diversity that evolves over time and also have certain rental rates, whereas new product, if we look at brand new retail spaces, often to get that diversity, you might have to employ almost like business casting, a casting call like SFU did for their businesses up on top of the university, where they owned the space and they were able to then kind of explore and find businesses that suit their local needs and preferences. But that's not really the case. We can't control individual tenancies through zoning, but what we can do is, as mentioned, there are certain controls around tenancy size and so on. I'm suggesting a financial analysis on the economics of the developing those lands will be very helpful, I think, information for council and staff to consider the viability, because we don't want to create a zoning that won't function in the marketplace. I'm not saying the suggestions would do that. I'm just saying we want to analyze that. The other is why is it that some of those slightly larger businesses are attracted to this area, and if not here, then where would they go in the community? So where are the draws in the community, I think, is an important question as well, given that we have regional needs, but we also have local needs, and so I think those are important concepts that I would recommend that we do some economic analysis as well as the land use form and character side. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's all good information. I really do think that we should, talk to the city of North Vancouver as well, because I mean, if you look down in their blocks, they've got like a barber. You can go and buy. There's a little dress shop. There's a hairdresser. There's a sushi restaurant. There's Brown's on the corner. It's in a small little space. Brown's on Lower Lonsdale is not a big space at all. Then you've got, the older buildings, an old curio, collectibles shop, a little bakery. There's a lot of different, so I get it, but I mean, we can control the uses that go in there, and we can control the size. I think Mr. Bidewell, before he left, had suggested minimums and maximums of sizing as a way to sort of control who was going in there. So it's not the zoning, it's the uses under the zoning, right? And no, you can't sort of control exactly who goes in there, but you can limit certain uses, and certainly, office or, professional offices have existed, like on Main Street at Mountain Highway. There's retail underneath some of those older buildings that are maybe 25 years old, 30 years old. And then they've got office space up above. So they rent out to like a real estate company or an insurance company, mortgage company, and they exist on the second floor in an office space. So I think there's certainly ways to do it. I would hope that we're somewhere between sort of the West 4th and Burnaby, that we fit somewhere in the middle. This is, I think it happens everywhere where you want to create that vibrancy. So people just have to, I guess the point of the sustainable model of the OCP was people getting out of their apartments and being able to walk to all the services they need instead of getting into their cars. So I think it's a benefit in regards to how that street operates, because there is an exceptional regional draw. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just comment, as somebody who drives Burnaby and I look at the new development that's occurring there, and they're experiencing some of the same things and same challenges that we are, quite frankly, in terms of commonality of design and banks and larger institutions taking up larger period areas. So I think there's probably something to learn there, and perhaps also with respect to the design, maybe that's a question we can ask our design panel, as to do perhaps a review of the designs that we have here, and provide some suggestions as to how we could mix it up a little. I think Burnaby has a little bit more variety in terms of the design than we do.
Well, I know when we started this process, because I was on council when we did it, and we worked with the community, and really the big impact was the shadowing of those taller buildings onto the single family neighborhoods behind. And so those slightly tilted roofs were the solution instead of the big peaked roofs. You know, and I think, you know, the design panel, when Tamsin, when the AOC was talking to all of the heads of the departments in regards to their work with committees, there was a discussion about allowing the design panel to take a look at the design guidelines and going back to the community and working with them. You know, I think many of these developments, because they're, you know, smaller, they tend to, you know, just sort of have book plans. There's not a lot of time spent on architectural, you know, design, and they all do, they are all admittedly quite repetitive. But it would be great if we could get, I think Blue Shore actually is coming down with something a little bit different from the rest of the street, but it is on a different piece of property. And so it would be great if we could look at those design guidelines again. I don't see anybody else. Councillor Forbes, do you have any comment on this, or you're good? Okay. Okay, well, there we go, 10 to 6. Okay, we're finished a bit early. Do we have any comments? I think we have some people in the audience.
Yes,
Maybe
we've
got some.
We have Mr. Ma, who has signed up to speak in the event.
Oh, I can't hear you. Okay, Mr. Ma, come on up. Or you're on Zoom. Turn on your camera, or you don't have to if you don't want to, but we'd love to hear your comments. Okay, Mr. Ma might not be there right now. Is Mr. Tevan, did he sign up as well? Oh, there he is. We don't seem to have Mr. Ma on Zoom right now.
Mr. Ma is there, and he appears to be unmuted. Mr. Ma, can you hear us? Okay, maybe, Your Worship, we can get back to him. Mr. Tevan said he did not sign up in advance, but does have his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Tevan, do you want to come down?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council. This is a topic that I know a little bit about. For a period of several years, I was the acting general manager and general sales manager at Destination Chrysler, which was originally located at 1177 Marine Drive, and then moved to 1600 Marine Drive. And I can say, not exactly willingly. At that point, the two Chrysler dealerships were merging into one. And a financial arm of Chrysler Canada owns 1600 Marine Drive, I believe still does. Perhaps acting mayor, you recall that I came and addressed council when the what I would call the so-called Marine Drive improvement plan came before council in 2006 and 2007. And we had some experience in our audit group because we had built at 12th and Kingsway, in the same corridor you guys have been discussing tonight, the first ever mixed use commercial with a car dealership with residential above it. That was the first one ever in all of North America. And what we appealed to the council at the time was, don't ban car dealerships. Just give us design guidelines that we can work with. Because here's the problem you have. By making the car dealerships legally non-conforming, what happened is they became frozen in place. Where literally Chrysler Canada came out with a new design, just a cosmetic fascia for the building. Okay, basically we're talking about, you know, some sticky tape and some new paint. Building application denied due to the legally non-conforming status. Couldn't even change the way the front door looked. Now, the reason they're frozen in time is this. Every car dealership is a franchise, and that franchise carries with it a primary marketing area that is designated by the manufacturer. Most of the North Shore car dealerships, the primary market area would include West Vancouver, City of North Vancouver, and District of North Vancouver. The problem is, if you want to come up with an alternate site that's within the District of North Vancouver, the alternate that might occur to you is the Main Street corridor. But the problem is that there's a set of franchise rules and laws called NADAP, the North American Dealer Arbitration Plan, that prohibits a car dealer from relocating within 8 kilometers of the same franchise. So if you tried to move Chrysler or you tried to move Volkswagen off of Marine Drive over to the Marine Drive corridor, the Volkswagen dealership on Boundary and Lougheed and the Chrysler dealership at Lougheed and Willingdon would have veto control over it. So what you've done is you've made sure that those car dealerships are staying where they are in their current form forever. It's just not going to happen. So I submit to you in summary that the plan has actually had the opposite effect of what you intended. Better to give them an authorized use that they have something to work with rather than freeze them in place. I have no interest in the car dealership business anymore, so I'm just telling you the plain facts. The plan backfired 100%. And at that point, the only one, and staff mentioned earlier, that one car dealership got redesigned, that was slipped in before this plan was approved. And it would not have been approved under the current plan. That was Mercedes. And you know, it's really had the opposite effect. The car dealerships have been some of the best maintained properties along that corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevan. Is Mr. Ma on the line? He says he has his mic on. It appears no one can hear us. You're right. He's trying another device right now, I understand. So let's just give him a minute. Yeah, I think the intention of blanket zoning Marine Drive at the time was, you know, a well-intentioned move. When the car dealer or when the auto mall was being built, it just seemed to make sense that they would go there. You know, obviously it didn't work out that way. Mr. Cost.
Good evening, Your Worship, Acting
Good
Worship.
evening.
And Council, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Maybe I have a good question here. You know, I drive down Marine Drive in the district, and I drive down Lonsdale in the city, and the vibrancy of the city is quite noticeable. And is it because the parking is quite extensively used on Lonsdale? They left enough room for that, and maybe Marine Drive just doesn't have enough on-street parking to sort of stop there and pop into the shops or the places. So that's one aspect to look at. I would look closer to home for successes at work, and that can be informative to making it more vibrant on Marine Drive. Hastings and Burnaby, I think that's again a 4-lane, 2 lanes in each direction. I find that a particularly nice street. We go there. Again, adequate parking right in front of the facilities, and that's what you want to do when you would want to pop into a bakery shop or whatever it is that frequent there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. Mr. Ma,
Can you hear me now?
can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yes, we
but
can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Herman Ma. Although I've lived in the district for 20 years, it was my neighbor, Paul Tubb, who represented Pemberton Heights Community Association on a subcommittee with district staff regarding the Marine Drive plan. I spoke with Paul yesterday, and tonight I present our joint comments. We appreciate that council is taking the time and effort to review this plan. Overall, the Marine Drive corridor has improved in the past 15 years. There's a refreshed look and there's additional housing options, but it's still an area in transition, as Mr. Cairns and Councillor Back have mentioned. Although the developments that have occurred have followed the guidelines, in our opinion, the area lacks vibrancy and it's not a pedestrian-friendly environment. It's not an engaging area. And I know some people talked about, curating or, having a cast call for businesses. I believe that the market will eventually, work that out, but it'll take time. But for now, to some degree, it's still a strip mall, but it has housing. In our opinion, the fundamental challenges are that Marine Drive is a major arterial road. Traffic is busy and fast along this corridor. And at peak times, traffic is nearly at a standstill because of all the traffic trying to head west towards Lions Gate Bridge. Sorry, okay, I'm still there. And the shape is very linear. So for those who choose to walk along the road, it's a long walk next to heavy traffic. And then finally, although the report indicates that nearly 55% of the business licenses in the area are restaurants, retail, and offices, that mix doesn't really, or the current mix doesn't really generate much pedestrian traffic. Notwithstanding the increased setbacks under the C9 plan, people still seem to be going place to place, but in their vehicles. As mentioned, the area has improved. We do have some questions that we like to pose. Moving forward, after the next 3 projects that are currently under review, and given that what comes next, as mentioned by Mr. Cairns, like 2/3 of the corridor still has to be developed. We hope that there's some adjustments to add some more character. One thought is maybe creating a plaza or some more area where people can gather. We also hope that the staff can look at the traffic issues along the corridor. I know that's a big ask, but right now it's not a really desirable place to go. There's just a lot of traffic on there and it gets bottlenecked at peak times, and that probably can't be good for businesses. In closing, we're looking forward to working with the staff and hopefully with the other CAs on next steps. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Okay, I think we've exhausted our speakers list. Thank Mr. Warden.
Yes, Your Worship. We see no other. Hold on a second. Oh, hand just appeared. Oh, that's Mr. Stewart.
Oh, Mr. Stewart.
Your Worship, one of the things that I think we all get kind of frustrated is we have a workshop and there's a bunch of ideas and suggestions, and it's not really clear as to what the consensus is. And I mean, I'll just fire back to what I think this discussion has identified in terms of things that we can look at. I mean, certainly the issue of what uses on what floors seem to be something that's worth looking at. Certainly the minimum and maximum unit sizes in order to encourage variety at the end of the day, rather than consolidation. I think Mr. Milburn is quite correct in the sense that we have to do some kind of a financial analysis to know what's happening with the market. Because we can design this all we want, but if the market's not going to support it, then it's going to be kind of an uphill battle. Certainly, the design is something that I've heard that we could at least take a look at, work with the design community, and then certainly look at what can we do to create more retail variety and a more friendly pedestrian experience. Marine Drive is going to be a main arterial, and in fact, it may even be more complex as we move forward with different kinds of transit use along that particular corridor. So I think we're going to have to be, go in this with eyes wide open. I hope that's a reasonable summary of kind of what I've heard and what we can take away as staff is something to look at.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if you were over in West Van when this happened. And you may have, when we were looking at creating sort of this vibrant street, I will tell you that the West 4th was used as a model to Marine Drive. That's what we were trying to achieve on Marine Drive, West 4th, with the small little, cafes and retail businesses, shopping, services. So West 4th was the model. And the streets on the new redeveloped portions are wide because there was this thinking that if we were going to get West 4th, we were going to have a lot of busyness. And in fact, we know that there isn't that busyness. It doesn't exist. So those streets were laid out, or those sidewalks were laid out to have the ability to sort of sit down, but also to have, a buggy. We didn't want to repeat Deep Cove. We didn't want to repeat Mount Seymour Parkway, where there were lamp standards in the middle of the sidewalks. We wanted to be able to have them wide enough that two buggies could walk across, walk down the width of the sidewalk, a walker or wheelchair or whatever. There was this real interest in looking at how you could achieve that busyness. And I think it's the uses and the size of the units that will dictate what goes in there. Because ultimately professional offices need larger spaces and they're going to go where they can lease. And I think, our responsibility is to zone appropriately, allow a variety of uses to be able to come in there. But our responsibility is not necessarily to, support the economics of any one company coming in and redeveloping a piece of property, in my opinion.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting as part of the financial analysis, we really understand if we're going to make any changes, what the likely consequences of those are. I mean, certainly the challenges that you're facing on West 4th now, which is, there's a lot of old single-story stock there. The problem with West 4th is you're starting to get, this whole best use issue, and a lot of those older buildings and older tenants are being forced out just because of taxation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'll be an interesting report when it comes back. Mr. Milburn, do you have?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just one final thought to add to the list provided by the CIO, and that would be that, we heard the question, what makes the successful corridor? So what are the elements that we could possibly draw on as best practices in the region? And I think we could add that to the items that we'll be returning with information on.
Right, and again, that Broadway corridor at the very end, they have had a lot of new redevelopment 4- and 5-story apartment buildings. So I know Mr. Stewart's, reflecting on some of the older buildings, and yes, that is very, that's an obvious in regards to, newer buildings being built, and those little tiny mom and pop stores may not be able to afford those lease rates. But if you look at the end of the Broadway corridor towards Kitsilano, towards Jericho, there's a lot of new redevelopment in there, and it's 4 to 5 stories. It's not much bigger than Marine Drive, and they've got a very eclectic mix of services. So I think maybe we could look at that as a really great model, to sort of mirror Marine Drive. Lower Lonsdale obviously has a huge amount of density there, and so it's a bit of a different egg. But I think there's some really great examples out there. Ms. Atva has suggested, Burnaby in some sections as well that might be, conducive to looking at in comparison to the district. Okay, so good comments. So we have a meeting at 7 o'clock, so we'll move adjournment on this meeting. Moved by Councillor Beck, seconded by Councillor Bond. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We'll see you at just before 7, or I think the mayor wanted to start a bit earlier. I'm not sure what those comments were, but 7 o'clock is our meeting. So we'll see you back here at 7. Thank you.